Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Friends of Audrey. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for coming to grace this event. We are very, very privileged to have Audrey, who is a very well-known English teacher. I've asked her how do I introduce her, and she says she's a teacher with a passion for the past, especially in the heritage of the convent and French convent, or CHIJ, now it's called IJC, and of SFI heritage. For those who are not familiar with this acronyms, CHIJ is a convent of the Holy Infant Jesus, and SFI is St. Francis Institution. So, besides that, Audrey is very, very humble. You know, this is a very short introduction. She's got loads of things behind her, and she has looked into her father's archives, and that's why tonight we have beautiful pictures for you to ponder upon. So I'm not the chief speaker, so I'll leave it to her. Please give a warm round of applause.
Hello, can you all hear me at the back? Yes. Yes. Good evening, everyone. Before starting, I would like to thank four special people: Jo Chua and Tiong, Colin Go and Bert at the back there. They were very kind in helping me scan some of the many photos and postcards and mementos among my father's collection. But more importantly, they have been close friends who have been very generous in their feedback, and they've encouraged me to give this presentation. Also, I would like to welcome all of you here, especially those of you who have come from outstation and from abroad. I'd like to single out my brother from Penang, Dr. Lim Keng Watt. Don't know where he is. And no, I'm as blind as a bat, I'm sorry. And my brother and sister-in-law, Cyril and Susan from London. Yeah, my good friend comes home from Bristol. They all happen to be visiting this neck of the woods at this time. So I'm very pleased that they are around. And those of you who are from outstation, welcome, and thank you for your support. So, now with that out of the way, I would like to bring you back to the past. And it is said, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. If you're familiar with literature, you realize that this is the opening sentence to L.P. Hartley's The Go-Between. Now, so is the past so very different from the present? I think so. Because if you take a look at the next slide, you might think, hey, this is the wrong slide. It's of nuns. And this is supposed to be the life and times of my father. But that is one of the things that was different about the past. In those days, at the turn of the 20th century, boys were allowed to study at the convent. But as soon as they turned 11 or 12, they were kicked out before they got too mischievous and went to all boys schools. So my father actually did his primary school in the convent. And he learned how to knit, and possibly some of the nuns here taught him. But his regular school was this one, St. Francis Institution. Wow. And if you can see, I think this photo is significant because you can see the sea there, which you can no longer see because everything is reclaimed as Makaraya. Can you see that? Oh, actually, I have a laser so I'm going to use it. Yeah, it's here. And then, I know it's a little bit too small. One of the things different is that there is a school teacher in a suit actually coming to school in a trishaw. Now, how many teachers do you know who come to trishaw, who come in a trishaw these days? And there is a car with no cover, but this is a school that he did all his education in, and also he started teaching there. So the next slide is this one, where my father had become a teacher, and there are brothers from all over the world, English as well as Irish, as well as a few Burmese brothers. And those of you who are from SFI might recognize some of the teachers here. I don't know whether I should be pointing out where my father is. He's here. What? Oh. Yeah, here. So there he is, and that is another difference between the past and the present, because the teachers were dressed very formally in suits and ties. It's not because this is a star photograph, and you might say perhaps that this is only for people who went to work, but later you will realize, if you go to the next one, here, my father had just started teaching, here, and then you see this motor car, and that motor car says M90. Can you imagine? That meant that there were probably about 100 vehicles in Malacca at that time, and that is a far cry from the thousands of cars who crowd into Malacca streets over the long weekend. I'm sure you're familiar with it. So, the next slide, we see what I want to show you, that the past was definitely a more elegant time. People were formally dressed, and even ladies who didn't go out to work. I'm sorry it's not such a high resolution, but you can see that the women are dressed formally in sarung kabaya here. Well, not formal for them, but in traditional clothes. My aunt here is in a white dress with white stockings, and the Eurasian ladies here have hats. So definitely more elegant and definitely more leisurely. So you might be wondering, what are they looking at? And because I was doing this presentation, I went through every slide again, and then I noticed that there are lines here, and they are about to watch a badminton match. Now this photo is probably around the 1930s, because by the late 1920s, badminton was popular, but in an ad hoc basis. But by the beginning of the 30s, in 1933, there was the formation of various clubs, including the Malacca Badminton Association. The next slide, Jenny, please. Yeah. So again, people are dressed formally, and it is obvious that in the past, no global warming, the weather was probably cooler. My father is in a full suit. My uncle next to him has a cardigan on, pullover on, and the man behind them has a pith helmet, like this man here. It might be cooler, but the sun was still blazing hot. And my aunt is again with the white stockings. This lady is in baju panjang, and my father's good friend, Yong Pak Kong here, is dressed to the nines in the sense that he has a suit, white pants, and he actually has a hat. Now, what is interesting about this photograph is that you can see railway sleepers here. My father had thousands of photographs. Unfortunately, most of them are uncaptioned and undated. But looking from his build, I think this would be in the early 1930s or late 20s. And I like to think that it's the Malacca railway station, and they are off on an outing. So, as some of you might know, or most of you are Malaysians, we do not have a Malacca railway station because the sleepers were taken by the Japanese to be used in the death railway in Thailand. Okay, so that's one difference also between past and present, the coolness of the climate and the way they dress. The next slide please, Daniel. Now, a major difference between the past and present, I think, is the way we communicate. Now we have SMSs and mobile phones and internet and of course Twitter, Facebook. But in those days, unless you were very rich and could afford a phone, and not many did in those days, this is dated 1923, 3rd of January. Communication was either face-to-face, you knew the person, or else it was through letters. And letters were done very beautifully. And this is an example. I'm going to pass it around, Colin. Sorry if I forgot. So there are not very many copies, but you might want to take a look at the beautiful penmanship because it is in cursive, and nowadays our school children are not taught to do cursive or longhand. They print their letters, I mean each individual letter. So most a pity. Now it is addressed to Master Lim Keng Watt because in 1923 my father was only 14 years old. And Mr. Freddie Paul from Burma had just finished 6 years teaching in SFI. Now you might think, how come a Burmese guy is teaching in SFI? Now remember, Burma in those days was a British colony, and of course the people were very well versed in English, and the Burmese brothers and teachers who came over had very high levels of proficiency in English. Anyway, if you read the whole letter, if those of you who are interested, you will notice that he is homesick for Malacca. So that is another difference, I think, the rapport between students and teacher. So the next one, please. Here we have my father, still as a student, so he's at the back here, in 1926. When he's 17 years old, it's his final year of education in SFI. And this brother here is Reverend Brother Dominic. This guy here is Big PG Pangdasa. Now, why do I call him Big PG? There were two PG brothers. Big PG, the older one, and the younger one, Mahindasa, is small PG. Why I mention the PG brothers, there will be a book coming out on these two PG brothers. They are very important because Big PG was the one who mooted the idea and initiated the idea of Pugu Stadium. And his bust, Big PG, Pamadasa, is still in Pugu Stadium. It might be shifted somewhere else, right? But anyway, Pugu Stadium is being renovated for some other use. Next slide, Daniel. Now, in 1927, it was a very significant year for my father because he finished his secondary school education. He started teaching in SFI, and how he got into teaching was actually by fluke, even though he was a very good teacher. He was being very capable, very busy, and he was at the office looking at the results of the exams. And Brother Banitas passed by and said, "Would you like a job to teach?" And so my father said yes, and he started teaching with the princely sum of 50 cents. And he did this for a few months without his father knowing. Anyway, he must have saved enough money to go on this All Malaya motorcycle tour, also 1927, with his good friend Yong Pak Hong. So, next slide, Daniel, please. So, you see here the tourist booklet dated 1927, my father's penmanship, Lim Keng Watt, and it says, Penang, Prince of Wales Island, the beauty spot of Malaya. So a little bit of over the top prose, but not to worry. Now, I do not know where exactly they went in this all-Malay tour, but from this, they obviously thought of Penang as the highlight of their tour. I would like to show you 2 pages from the booklet. Yeah, please. Yeah. So, in this, I would like to concentrate on this one here. And you see that the advertisement says, the delightful way to see Penang. What does it say? I'm so short-sighted. Land of perpetual summer. So obviously the tourists of those days were rich colonials and Europeans. And if you want to see Penang in the delightful way, you take the world's most luxurious motor tour. Of course, the 2 young men couldn't afford it, but it didn't matter. I'm sure they had a grand old time on that motorbike, because they were very adventurous. My father and his friends did lots of excursions, but I'm just sharing a little bit. Okay, next one. In 1927, I said, very important year for my father and for Boy Scouts in Malacca, because this is in Malay, but in English it says the first King Scouts in Malacca, 1927, and there were 6, and all of them were from SFI. Lim Keng Watt, my father, Lim Keng Siong, his brother, and then you can see the rest of the names. I won't mention all of them. But I wanted to show you this plaque because it is donated by Mr. Chua Yong Song, who also was one of the later King Scouts, and this plaque hangs in SFI. Next slide, please. So another important event in 1927, the 6 Scouts, the King Scouts, they went with 4 Scouts from SFI to Penang to attend the All Malaya Jamboree. And here we have Josephine, Katie Joseph. He's identified here. So he's one of the Scout Masters. This is Mr. Loh Hang Lun, Jimmy, you might know his name. And this is Mr. Wheeler, who is the Assistant District Commissioner of Malaya. And he was the one who donated the flag, which says 3rd Fort, to the SFI Scouts, because they were the sole representatives of Malacca for this jamboree. The next one, we have, apart from scouting, my father was very interested in art and culture, because the education in the mission school was grounded in a love for language and literature and the arts. And my father was always very interested in music. So this is a musical evening with the Spanish Tea Garden Vaudeville Company, all the way from, it doesn't say, but I think they are from the Philippines, because it says Philippines, Manila, and European vaudeville stars. If you look at the program, which I don't have, I mean, I didn't put it there because there were far too many slides. What I wanted to stress is that that evening took place, the show was performed over 4 nights, which implies that Malacca was far from being a backwater, sleepy hollow with people with no love of the arts. They were cultured enough to enjoy this. Please, next one. Yeah. My father was also a musician, and you can see him here holding a violin, because he was a violinist. I knew he played the violin, and he also played the cello. Later I found out that he also played the euphonium. And this, in his handwriting, at the bottom here, very faint, fancy dress, hotspurs. Now all these are men, and they are in fancy dress. Now what is the occasion? One of the traditions of the Malaccan culture in those days would be every Chinese New Year, there would be a procession or some kind of event, but only men were allowed to go out. And these were the men who would dress up and they would go around town and have a merry old time and entertain the other people. So he was a very keen musician. And the next one, please. Of course, my father had his own group of friends. He belonged to this Sri Lankan quartet. And this comes from James Cherion's book. And it says, Lim Keng Watt here, his good friend Yong Pat Kong, and this is Captain Muhammad Ali. This guy here is a younger brother of the PG brothers, and this is Lee Yun Fu. They are the gang of five, the present gang of five. These people are here, including the five of us. But this gang of five, again, they are formally dressed, and why I put this picture in is there is a mystery behind the history. And Colin and Josephine and Andrew Huang and Bert, we have been trying to work out who this Captain Muhammad Ali is. There were actually two Captain Muhammad Alis. One, the older one, is Captain Muhammad Ali Maidin. And he was also a soldier, Indian Muslim. And this one, he went for the victory parade in 1946 with my father. But he is listed in the program as Muhammad Ali Saleh. So it becomes a little bit confusing, but here he is actually, Colin, Captain Muhammad Ali Muhammad. So maybe somebody will be able to clarify the whole situation, but I know he was one of my father's best friends. They went to London together. My father was still in touch with him, and he, after leaving the army, he was working for the Sultan of Pahang, I think. Yes, Pahang. Okay, next slide. Now, my father is a sportsman. Another bit of mystery here. The very faint caption does say that it was taken in 1930. And this is the Chan Kang Sui Trophy, given by this leading philanthropist, and of course his name is Chan Kang Sui. So he used to give trophies and donations to various sports bodies and cultural bodies. But this one is obviously for football, because if you look at the picture closely, I have a picture of this, and it's this big. All the pictures are really huge. It says CFA, which stands for Chinese Football Association. So, the mystery is, this is definitely in Malacca, but where in Malacca is this? I thought it was Bukit Baru. Bert says that it's probably Bandar Hilir? Is that what you're saying, near the church of the Trialing? One of these mysteries to be solved, if ever. Next one, please. Now, my father was a very active teacher, and here it is a photo of the visit of the CEO, not Chief Executive Officer. CEO is, of course, Chief Education Officer and the Inspector of Schools, a Mr. Frisbee, who came to visit, and these are the SFI staff cadet officers. And what is interesting about this is some of you might recognize some of the teachers here. This is Big PG, Pamadasa, and my father is here, and Mr. Fali Tercera, Mr. Area, again Mr. Yong Pat Kong. He wasn't a teacher, he was the school clerk, but he was very actively involved. So, the SFI cadets started very early in 1918. So it was one of the earliest in the country. Now the next slide is the big year, 1933. Those of you who attended Jerry Deneline's talk, 1933, Malacca, not so sleepy hollow. So this is the year of the big Wangkang. Now for those of you who are not familiar with the Wangkang, Wangkang means royal barge or king's boat. And this is really the biggest Wangkang ever. But I won't talk about it too much. The reason is because the Malaccan Guardian issued a whole commemorative issue on it. And Joyce's father, is it Joyce? Where are you, Joyce? Your grandfather was involved in much of this magazine also. So it's a very interesting magazine focusing on the Wangkang, and it tells you that in spite of the huge expenses building the Wangkang, eventually the boat would be put to sea and burnt. Why? To burn all the bad luck, the pestilence, disease, whatever. And it was like, the last one was 1919 and then 1933. But they couldn't have the next 14 years because World War II broke out. Now, 1933 was also significant for this because though my father played many sports, his forte was in badminton. And this is a Shamrock badminton party, formed actually late 1932, but they take their foundation date as 1933. And if you can see here, the patron is Captain Lim Keng Watt. And why I'm pointing him out, because somebody was asking about, I think his relative, this guy here. And the reason he's a captain is he was in the volunteer force. And you see the various people who are involved. My father was the, I'm so blind. Yes, he was the honorary vice captain. But okay, so if you turn over to the next slide, Daniel, thank you very much. I do not know whether you can see this, but here are a few names, and some of you might recognize your uncles or your grandfathers here. But I just wanted to show that among the names, you'll see a few Lims. Lim Keng Watt, Lim Keng Watt, Lim Keng Watt, and all that. And why was this? Because my father and his sisters were all very involved in badminton. And why was this? Because it was right at 222 Badminton, our family home. And that place, which is now Fairway Hotel, boasted of 2 badminton courts. One at the back of the house, and behind the garage there was another badminton court. So it was very active. And the group of people in the Shamrock badminton party, if you turn over to the next slide, this is the back of our house. You see, it was an old-fashioned house, and it was a big family home where my father and his siblings all lived. But by the time I grew up there, it was just my father and my oldest aunt. Now here is the family patriarch, my grandfather, my father's father, and he's right smack in the middle because it is his home. So you can see that it is a mixed group of people because you have Miss Juliet Pereira, an Indian, you have one European-looking lady or a very fair Eurasian, there are some Malays, and basically Chinese, again Mr. Yong Kwat Kong here, my uncle here, and so what was this photo of? The photo was taken after a tournament, and in those days, because of the level of English among my father's circle of friends, they loved punning, so they called it the Badminton tournament. So this was the Badminton tournament in 1930 or 33. Yes, 1933. So this is where I grew up. You know, all of us grew up. Huh? Yeah, so the next slide is, I told you 1933, very important year because we have the start of the Malaccan Badminton Association. Small PG, Maindasa, big PG, Papadasa was the president. Tam Sitwa, whom some of you might recognize as a banker, the manager of OCBC also, I've been told. And my aunt, on my mother's side, Mrs. Pu Sian Eng, who was Mrs. Lo Hang Lun's sister. My father is there. Okay, the names are all there, but I won't bore you with all the names. You can take a look more closely if you want to. So, Mr. PG, Big PG, was instrumental in strengthening the quality of sports and the interest in sports, you know. Not only badminton, it was hockey, it was football. He was involved in so many of these activities with his brother, even though they actually didn't play the sport, but they were just heart and soul into it. Next slide, Daniel. Now, this is to show that my father and his friends, this guy here was the first president of the Shamrock Badminton Party, and this group won the first inter-party badminton championships in 1937. This guy here appeared in a lot of my father's pictures, and I didn't know who he was, but later I found out that he was my father's best man, Ho Kim's son. So, this is just to say that my father was interested in sports, especially badminton, was a very keen scouter and a very good musician. You know, a man of many interests, and used to collect a lot of things. You know, I haven't gone, it's only the tip of the iceberg of all this, all these mementos. Next one, Daniel, thank you. So he was also interested in drama, and this says Avid the Cobbler, 1934. So it didn't matter that there was no caption, because there it is, and here he is, not in costume, which implies that he was in the crew of the production. And my aunt here, Miss Lim Keng Watt, his older sister, whom some of you might know as the first lay primary convent headmistress, she made the costume. And then my two aunts here, Miss Lim Wat Eng, my Kochi, the youngest one, and then Wat Lien, my fifth auntie. Now, I'm going to talk more about Miss Lim Wat Eng later, but this proves that Malacca was very active in drama, and there were things being staged and performed. This production was done by the Seng Chong Society to raise funds for China in its war against Japan. Okay, next one please. This is another interesting photo, at least I hope you find it interesting. It is called Perbualan Dunia, and we could not make out what it was, but later I found a very faint caption which had faded, and I had to do like a negative so that I could see it. And Perbualan Dunia means world conversation. This was staged in 1939, again to raise funds, but not for China. It was for poor people. And when I saw this photo, huge photo again, I said, why are these women so unattractive? You know, not good looking at all. And then I realized that they are actually men in drag, because the Puranicans, like in Shakespearean days, women were not allowed to strut their stuff on stage. Women did not take part. So all these are men in drag. Now, if you look at the staging here, we were trying to work out where this place was, where the drama was staged. And the caption says, Stella Hall City Park. So all of us, where City Park we know, Stella Hall we hadn't the faintest idea. I even went to Ming Seng to look for these pillars and the columns, and no, it's nothing like that. Then again I looked at the photo, and it is a very good piece of painting. It is actually flat, and they managed to have that depth because of the painting. If you take a look, the next slide, that is Stella Hall. It was open air, and what they had done was at the back, they would have the backdrop and then the paintings and all that, and then the show was staged. It was a Bangsawan play. The next one, please, Daniel. Yeah, my father and his musical interests. And this one here, it says HH, or so it says, but actually it is HA, which means Hotspurs Association. The Hotspurs were formed in the 1920s, 1927 then? Yeah, about 1927 or 1925, and you might recognize this place as the governor's residence, the grounds. My father is here with his violin, and this is his younger brother, Lim Keng Watt. More about the Hotspurs. They were a very active society, but within a decade it folded up for some reason or other. But while it was in existence, it had a lot of musical performances, and this one is on the occasion of the visit of Sir Hugh Clifford, who became governor of the Strait Settlement of Malacca, 1927 to 1930. Next, please. Again, my father as a musician, he belonged to many musical groups. Apart from the SFI Quintet, he was also in the SFI Orchestra. All these pictures are not shown because it's too much of Lim Keng Watt. But this is important because this is the MBC band. What does MBC stand for? It stands for, come on, yes, Malacca Volunteer Corps. So this is a mixed group, and the band leader here is a Eurasian whose name is very unusual, Creson, C-R-E-Z-E-O-N, related to Flora. Flora's grandfather-in-law or something like that. Okay, so Jimmy Tay has just told me that my father is actually holding at his feet a euphonium. So that is another instrument that I didn't know that my father played. And then the next group that he was also a member of is this Seng Cheong Brass and Reed Band. And what is interesting here, this one of course from the name, it is all Chinese, and there's my father playing the trumpet. And next to him is Tong Han Fung's father, Tong Hon Kun, who played the trumpet. And when this appeared in Facebook, she got very excited and she said, "You think our fathers were very good friends?" And I said, "I'm sure they were, because their daughters one generation later are also very good friends." So, you know, I'm sure, yeah. So what is the date for this? Is it dated? It's not dated, so I'm sorry, but I think it's a little bit later than 1930. Next one. Now, my father was educated, as I said, in SFI, right? And in SFI, because a lot of the brothers were English, they instilled in their students a love of the British Empire and also a love for British royalty. And my father had so many mementos of the British royalty from the time of George V, Gentleman the King. And this is a commemorative issue celebrating the silver anniversary of George V, Queen Elizabeth's grandfather. And this is a commemorative coin. And this is 1935, I think, or 36. But within a year, he had passed away to be succeeded, next slide, by Edward VIII. Now, this is a commemorative issue, but it is a bit unusual because it's actually made up of blank bits where you are supposed to put stickers in. If you buy more Cadbury's, and you'll get various pictures of Edward as a young man, Edward playing with his puppy, Edward doing this and that and the other. And it's very interesting. But as you know, Edward was not to reign for very long. He only lasted 1 year, beginning of January to beginning of to December 1936, because he said, I cannot rule England without the help and support of the woman I love. And you know who the woman he loved, right? Wallace Simpson. You know, big scandal. Because for a king to abdicate, it wasn't like Charles I who had his head cut off. This one, he willingly abdicated. And so the crown fell to his brother, George VI. Now, George VI was known as Bertie. Unlike his very glamorous older brother, he stammered and was very shy, and he didn't want to become king because he had this speech impediment. Those of you who are film buffs and who have seen the king's speech, you realize that that is the king I'm referring to, Queen Elizabeth's father. Now, the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth, never forgave Edward for leaving her husband in that position. And he was very diffident, but with the support of his wife, the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth also, and also his speech therapist, an Australian called Lionel Lowe, I can't remember, Lowe, yes. He managed to conquer his stammer, and he made a lot of rousing, inspirational speeches, which were very important during World War II, because Britain was more or less standing alone against Nazi Germany. So the strain on George VI was quite great, and he died quite young in his 50s, and he was of course succeeded by Queen Elizabeth in 1953. No, 1952, but she was coronated, yes, in 1953, because that's the year I'm using. Next one. Now, so as a loyalist, loyal to the British Empire, and a royalist, if I can just pun, royalist and loyalist, my father heeded this cartoon by Yankee Leong from the Malayan Saturday Post, dated March 18, 1933. And if you can see it, it says, join the volunteers. You know, we call all young men to help defend the British Empire. And so my father did that. He enlisted in 1928, and in 1935, he was promoted to the rank of sergeant. Next one, please. Yeah. So this is a picture of my father in uniform, and he is here. And this is after they won a shooting match. The shooting match, they won 3 times that I know of, in 1931, 1932, and 1939. I'm sorry I'm giving so many dates, but I am a teacher. I used to teach history. So if you don't want the dates, just forget about them. But what is interesting is that this team won a number of times, and my father actually won an efficiency medal for shooting. So the cup was donated by a Chinese man. I can't remember his name, Chia or something like that, but I won't burden you with too many details. So these are all volunteers From Malacca, they belonged to B company. There were 4 companies. A company for Europeans, B company for Chinese, C company for Malays, and D company for Eurasians. Next. Now, why was it so important that there should be volunteers in British Malaya? Because if you look at this cartoon, also by Lim Keng Watt, and this is, the date is not shown, but it is 1933 January, we have a very belligerent Japanese samurai representing Japan, and it is getting very angry and very, let's fight. And it is booting. The league here is a League of Nations. Those of you who know anything about history, the League of Nations was formed after the Great War, or the First World War, 1919, but it was an ineffective body. You know why? Because even though President Woodrow Wilson initiated the idea, America was not in the League of Nations. So the most powerful nation in the world did not join, and the aim of let's keep peace so that war does not break out on such a devastating scale. Let's keep peace. But it wasn't able to do so because countries like Germany, countries like Japan, they were casting greedy eyes. They wanted to expand territorially, and Japan here, according to the caption, is running amok. And this is 1933. By this time, it was obvious that Japan had military ambitions and they were going to do something about it to accommodate their growing population. What did they do? They had this system of spies. They sent various Japanese to very strategic towns in Southeast Asia. And these people did not come in military posts. They were doctors, they were dentists, they were shopkeepers, they were photographers. Now it's very important because photographers, they can take pictures and they can send information about the military defenses of the country concerned. And they did this for about 10 to 15 years, so that Japan had done its homework. So it was inevitable with Germany getting so aggressive, with Japan getting so aggressive, and they became the Axis powers, along with Italy, that war clouds were gathering. And so we come to the second part of the presentation, a dark period in Malayan history. Now, this pamphlet, found in my father's collection, says in Kanji, I don't know who can read this, but this is in Bahasa, this is in Malay, which asks the Malayans to celebrate this glorious day, this auspicious day. Why? Because we Japanese have come to liberate you from your British colonial masters. They are useless, they are bad, they have been taking advantage of you. What we are going to do is we are going to create Asia for the Asians. We are going to create a greater co-prosperity sphere. Wonderful words, lots of propaganda, but later, in the 3.5 years of the Japanese occupation, it was to prove an empty boast. And Malayans would say, not within hearing distance of their Japanese masters, it's not the co-prosperity sphere, it is the co-poverty sphere. Because it was a very hard life for all Malayans, especially for the Chinese. Because the Japanese hated the Chinese, and they had already started the Sino-Japanese War in 1937. So the Malayan Chinese had a hard time. But if you take the next picture, The Japanese, with their usual efficiency, said, we are going to instill the station, the Japanese spirit, emphasizing discipline, endurance, and obedience to the emperor. So they had songbooks, they had Japanese dictionaries, Nippon-go, because the schools were now going to be Japanese schools, and it was Nippon-go, Japanese, was going to be the medium of instruction. So, Colin, can you pass the next bit around? No, not the GK done. I think my pathway. The next one, please. The next slide. Number 2. Which is number 2? Oh, sorry, no, later. Put it back, yeah. So, I can't even remember. Yeah, you can pass that round. Now, the Japanese, as you know, conquered Malaya very, very fast. The British were very complacent and they felt that Singapore was impregnable. Singapore could not be conquered, and they had the guns pointing southwards towards the sea. But the Japanese, of course, came from the north, Kota Baru. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941. And the very same day, but because it's a different time zone, they overran Manila, Hong Kong, and Kota Baru. That is December the 8th. So, Woodrow Wilson, Roosevelt said that this is a day of infamy because what had the Japanese done? They had bombed Pearl Harbor without any declaration of war, crippling the American Navy. But in the long run, it was a blunder because it brought America into the war. But in the meantime, Japan was having a field day in Malaya, and even though they were few in number, the British, by the way, because I was doing a lot of reading, they were outnumbered by the British. The British outnumbered the Japanese 3 to 1. But the British didn't know that. They thought the Japanese army that came to Malaya was very big in number, and in the end they surrendered, and it was a very humiliating defeat for Singapore and for Malaya and for the British Empire. Next, please. Now, this one is during the Japanese occupation, and you will notice that it is chopped in kanji, in Mandarin here, and it is addressed, if you can see it, to Lim Hap Yok, my father's relative, of 222 Banhile. And what it says, thanks to Daniel or Melanie, it says that the bearer of this note is allowed to use this bicycle without its being requisitioned. Now that is important because the Japanese, when they came over from Japan, of course, they couldn't bring all the bicycles, and as they came southward down the peninsula, they would commandeer bicycles and trucks and lorries and whatnot. But the Lim family was lucky enough to have a permit to use a bicycle. And this is important because of the next picture. Okay, we'll not deal with this, we'll come back later. Go back to the next one. Because here we have a picture, and this is my aunt Lim Wat Chu, Miss Juliet Pereira, my parents, and one Eurasian lady. If anybody can identify her, it would be nice. But what I like about the picture, again, which is not really present in the present, is that we have a spirit of Mahiba, intermingling among the races, just like in the quintet just now of my father and his friends, one Malay, one Indian, and Chinese, and one, yeah. Okay, so why my aunt is featured here is that she was arrested by the Japanese. Now we will go back to the previous slide. Yeah, this one, which Colin has passed out. Not passed. Handed out. Yeah, passed out. Sorry. You know, I do teach English, but sometimes when you get old, yeah, you know, but I think I'm still standing strong here. Yeah. So this is my father's note, and unfortunately it's all over the place. So this is one note here. Oh, see, one note here, and then another note here. But it tells you of his war experience, Sergeant Lim Keng Watt, and those of you who are into 4 digits, you can buy 80047. Drop 10 or whatever you want, and maybe you might strike, and then you can blunder me. So my father was very brave, or maybe foolhardy, or both. He volunteered to go down to Singapore to evacuate the volunteer families to Singapore. Because remember, Singapore was considered very safe. So let's get these families who are in jeopardy because they will be targeted by the Japanese. And he went with Captain Cho Xiao Lim, who passed away. My father must have led a charmed life, because somehow or other, the fall of Singapore, 15th of February, he went into hiding for 2 weeks and he escaped the Sukching. The Sukching means ethnic cleansing of Chinese. He hid in Sungai Besar, and then he came out, surrendered to the Japanese, and he actually, if you can see this note, very faint, it says that he bought a train ticket for $5, but before he could do that, he was interrogated by the Japanese, and okay, he got the ticket, and he was dumped into a cattle truck along with 39 other people, men and women, and they had to do their business there. So you can imagine how stuffy it was and how unpleasant, but he got home safe and sound. So he was lucky in that sense. Now, so back to my aunt, she wasn't so lucky because she was a teacher in the French convent and therefore a mission school and therefore considered a pro-British sympathizer. But more importantly, my 5th aunt told me, she was the treasurer of the Seng Chong Society. Remember those dramas? To raise funds for China against Japan? So she was a marked woman, just as my father was a marked man. But my father was quite resilient, and remember the bicycle? Remember Lim Keng Watt? So she was in jail for a few months, and sorry, I better put this off. She wasn't in Meng Seng, the headquarters of Kempitai, and in the list here of names, she is the only woman. This is a book by Katie Joseph. She is one of 20 people arrested in October 1943. So, conditions were not really good, and my grandfather would bring her food, but of course he couldn't do it every day, and he got his youngest daughter, my Kochi, Lim Wat Eng. She got this bike and she would cycle to jail, like a jail, at the end of Bandar with bits of jewelry and gold in order to bribe the guards so that she could smuggle food to my aunt. Now there is a story that my aunt was due to be executed, but just in the nick of time she was saved because of the Japanese surrender. But I think if she was in jail October 1943 and the Japanese surrender was only 2 years later, I think it's very unlikely, though it's a very romantic tale. I have to find out from my one surviving aunt who's 92, 93 years old, the real story. Okay, next one please. Now, Colin, can you pass this out? Now, I taught Form 4, Form 5 and Form 6 history, Malaysian history, but never have I heard of the Jigedan. The Jigedan is like the Rukun Tetangga, and here you can see in English that they are the guardians of peace and order, because like the British, the Japanese realized we are very small in number. We have to get the local people to do some of their own policing. And it was actually like a spy system. And they are supposed to be the eyes and ears of the Japanese. You report any suspicious misdoings and people who are behaving very strangely, blah, 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 and all that. So, if you see the other page, which is not here, but it's being sent around, my father was unemployed for 4 months after his surrender and after his imprisonment at the Malaccan jail also. Why? Because he was a marksman being a volunteer, right? Now that was a very tough situation, because by this time my father had 3 boys growing and of course a wife, and then later on my younger brother, my youngest brother. So, after 4 months he decided, I am going to see the governor of Malacca. His name was Ken Surumi. And this Surumi was English educated. He was formerly the Consul General of Singapore. So he was a more cultivated person, and my father was able to persuade him to reinstate all ex-volunteers so that they could work in government posts. Government posts meaning Japanese positions. So who were his fellow petitioners? He decided one hiba also. Let's have a Chinese man, the sergeant himself. Then we had Roy de Vries and Ahmad Nordin. So they went to see Ken Surumi, and he said, okay, you can be reinstated. And my father was re-employed as a teacher in SFI, but for a short while, and then was in Trinkira School, which had a Japanese name, of course. And apart from that, next one please, no, not the next one, go back to this. If you see the back of this here, back, at the back here, not all of you have it, Malacca Central is divided into 10 districts, and my father was lucky to be appointed the Dancho, or the headman of the district. The district was the Dai Ruku, and the 6th district, and the Dai Ruku comprised Bandai St. John's and Lorong Panjang. So he was in charge. And who were his assistants? Roy de Vries and Ahmad Nordin. Now, why did I say he was lucky? Because he had a job on top of his teaching position. He was paid in Japanese money, of course not really worth much, but very importantly, he got rice rations and cigarette rations. That is crucial, because people had a hard time looking for food. My father didn't smoke. You go to the black market and you exchange the cigarettes for more important commodities, food and oil and sugar and whatnot. Yeah. So how did I know this? I went down to Singapore to do some research, and my older cousin said our family was lucky in that way. And by this time, my father had 4 boys. I wasn't born until later. Okay, next one after the war. Here we have the pamphlet, this time dropped by British planes. And it is in Mandarin, translated by Daniel, thank you Daniel, and also by Melanie, who translated the whole thing. Now this is in Mandarin, but I dare say there were pamphlets in Malay and in English telling the people of Malaya, Japan has surrendered. We British are coming back. and they asked for the people of Malaya to cooperate and, whatever, and do all the correct things. Unfortunately, the interim period between, you know why World War II ended, right? Yeah, because of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and on the 15th of August 1945, Japan surrendered unconditionally. So the British dropped all these pamphlets throughout Malaya to say we are coming back. But there was a gap month and a half, depending on the area of Malaya, where the Japanese had surrendered but the British hadn't come. Total chaos. And there was racial dissension, and there was a lot of killing and massacres, and this indirectly led to the emergency. More of that later. So next slide. So it was back to business. My father went back to SFI to teach, but not for long. Not because he didn't want to teach, because he was lucky enough. I think you can't see this letter, but it says here, it says here that Sergeant Lim Keng Watt, Lieutenant A.S. Machado, and CSM, Company Sergeant Major Muhammad Ali, here he is again, were appointed to represent the Malaccan Volunteer Force in the Victory Parade in London in 1946. And they were to be commanded by Major General Stubbs. Now this is a Victory Parade magazine, and it is a very interesting read because the level of English is superb. It's all written by Malayan soldiers, and it is a cross-representation. Malays wrote, Chinese wrote, Indians wrote, and Major Stubbs also wrote. If you can pass that along, Colin.
Malayan soldiers.
Yeah. So the next one here, Daniel, please. Sorry. This is a ship, Orientis, that brought my father along with 600 other soldiers, armed forces, not necessarily just army people, armed forces, to London. They started off from Singapore in April 1946. They arrived about 3.5 weeks later in Southampton, and then in London on the 18th of May 1946. And because it was such a big contingent, we had the Malayan Victory contingent being billeted on the grounds of Kensington Gardens. This is an envelope of a letter written by his good friend Mr. Area, and why I'm showing this is that you must realize that it is not only Malayan soldiers who went for the Victory Parade, it was all the, I passed that round, right? So it was all the British, not Commonwealth, British Empire countries that had been involved in the war. So it was a very, very big parade. Even though Britain was suffering from rationing and coupons, they felt that we had to thank the local people for coming to our aid. So the next one here, we see our 3 Malaccan volunteers. Company Sergeant Major Muhammad Ali, Sergeant Lim Keng Watt, Lieutenant Alfred Machado, Colin's uncle-in-law. Okay, who are these 2 young ladies? We do not know. But the British people just were so kind, even though they were suffering from rationing and the coupon system, and all these people from all over the Commonwealth. So they had British women who were involved in the army or just as volunteers to bring them around as tour guides and to entertain them at home, because my father has a number of pictures of people, and he had autographs and all that. So if you take a look at the next slide, I just wanted to show that it's not only the three main races, but also some Indians and others. And this man is actually our uncle. Uncle Amrit Sodhi. Those of you who know Sandra Sodhi, who is very famous in theatre in Malaysian circles, this is her father. He was in the local defense corps in KL, and he was also in the victory parade. Now, how did he become my uncle? I do not know whether you want to hear the story or not. Okay. My father, even though he was very actively enjoying all the sights and sounds and collecting autographs from all over, he said, you know, Amrit, I have a younger sister who's not married. Would you like to meet her? You know, I can matchmake the two of you. And my uncle said, if she is as dark as you, I do not want to meet her. So they did not meet because of my father's, actions. They met later on another sea voyage, and they fell in love, and that's how he became my uncle. Now I'm showing this picture of my father and his fellow sergeant at Brighton. This is Sergeant Tan Tek Ho from Seramban, and Brighton was one of the places they visited. They went all over. They went all the way to Scotland, Edinburgh only, but in London itself, they went to Shepperton Studios. All this is in this book here.
My family was shamelessly,
but it's very old, more than 50 years old. So the article is written by one of the volunteers, whereas Lieutenant Machado writes about the theatre scene in London. Anyway, they went to Margate, they went to Ramsgate, they visited the Dunlop factory, they visited the, what's the other factory they went to? I can't remember. Anyway, they went to lots of places, and of course met the King and Queen while they were on parade, you know, being inspected. Next one. Now, two pictures of my father with his sergeant's stripes. I didn't want to include these two slides because it seems so like, oh yeah, Lim Keng Watt, you know, Audrey's father, all this. But Bert said, no, you must include your father, so dashing. So this is for you, Bert. Otherwise, it wouldn't be featured.
Macam Melayu lah.
Yeah.
Macam Melayu.
So next one. This is the program of the victory celebrations. I think Colin has passed it around. And if you see the program, I know it's very faint because the photostat machine wasn't very good, but it says that they had illuminations as well as fireworks. The fireworks was on the 8th of June 1948. And 6th of June 1946, sorry. Getting tongue-tied. And they had illuminations for 1 week. Now, while I was doing this, I realized why in June. Of course, beautiful weather, but also because the King's birthday or the Queen's birthday is usually celebrated the first weekend of second weekend or the first weekend of June. So it was a very grand procession, march past. Next one, please, Daniel. And this one is by Major Stubbs. We'll come to that later. Here we have the Malayan Armed Forces proudly marching from Marble Arch, the beginning point, to Hyde Park, right? Yeah. So they would march along, and remember, this is only part of the march past because there would be other soldiers from Mauritius, from Malta, from wherever you saw that program. And the next one, there they would make the official salute near Nelson's Needle or Nelson's Column, And look at the precursor of the Malaysian flag. And that is Malaya House.
Which belongs to my
Right? So it is a historic photograph. Now, if we go back to the previous slides, the one with this one, we had Major Stubbs, the guy who brought them on the victory parade on that boat. He said that he was very proud, and this is again one thing that is different between past and present. Because he said it was so heartwarming that all the races, sorry, how do I switch it off? That all the races, you know, blended in, and there was give and take, and there was real harmony. And this is one thing I'm sorry to say we are lacking these days, you know. We tend to be in our little ethnic groups more or less. Okay, next one please. Yeah. My father was a great collector of postcards and stamps and autographs. So these are autographs from the Malayan V for victory contingent. So they are all the soldiers, the VPs, and the next one also VPs. Next one. And you can see Force 136. Remember I said that in the interim period between the British coming and the Japanese surrender chaos, the Force 136, who had been fighting a guerrilla war with the help of the British during the Japanese occupation. But they were, of course, still lucky enough to go on the victory parade. Now the next set of signatures, very faint, Lord Mountbatten and Edwina Mountbatten. Lord Mountbatten was of course the supremo of the armed forces in the British Empire. Now, great hospitality here. It is from a newspaper cutting, and did I pass this out? No. Okay. He says here, this is Stubbs. He says the boys were greatly impressed with the hospitality and kindliness of the ordinary people in UK. The Association of British Malaya, they arranged for so many activities, blah 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 and all that. So in summary, this is what they found. They found London's traffic bewildering. Nothing has changed then, it's still bewildering. The underground exhilarating, I don't know whether I find it exhilarating, sometimes it's quite frustrating. The king and queen, charming. And the women stunning, beautiful English roses. And the coupon system and rationing worrying. There they were, enjoying great hospitality with nice food and a lot of presents and souvenirs, but the ordinary British people were still suffering from rationing. But it was very heartening that the war damage in London was less than they expected. But all in all, we enjoyed our stay in
the Queen said.
London very, very much, and of course in Scotland also. But the bulk of their stay was in London and the surrounding area. So the next bit is the boat that brought them home. And this is the Mauritania. It left Liverpool in June, can't remember the date, and it reached Singapore barely 17 days later, which was a record. They weren't speeding, they weren't going to set any records, but there it was a smooth journey, and they enjoyed themselves tremendously. So they came back, and it was back to business as usual. My father went back to school, he started teaching. Remember, he was a King Scout. So, 1946, this is the enumerators of the census in 1946. And Mr. Loh Hang Loon is here, my father. So, the people who were involved were the Scout Masters, the Scouts, and the Sea Scouts. Why was it important to collect statistics? Because during the Japanese occupation, of course there were facts and figures, but there were lots of propaganda. People went missing, they disappeared, they went off on the death railway, never returned, that sort of thing. So for the first time, statistics were being gathered from all over the country, but this is from Malacca, and the Scouts were involved. So, next bit. Here is my father as Scoutmaster, and he organized the very first Scouters training camp. You notice that they are not boys, they are all Scoutmasters, and they underwent a course that my father organized. I actually have the program, and the program is quite interesting with timetable, everything very organized. The paper is very thin, it's yellowing, so I didn't focus at it. This is in Lere Malay School. It was over 3 days, I presume Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So he was very active as a scout all his life. Next one. But of course, above all, he was a teacher. So he was one of the teachers who attended the inauguration of Teachers Union of Malacca, and this is 1947. And Jimmy, of course, you recognize this, don't you? High School Malacca. And I counted 36 teachers. How many women? 4 women. Mrs. Loh Hang Loon is here. And 3 other women. This one I think is Florence Lazaru, because I recognize her from a later picture. So nothing has changed then. It's still very much a man's world. The women are at home and the men go out gallivanting. Okay, so we must do something about it. Next. Now this is a picture that I need. And this is another school. This is a primary French convent. And I told you that my aunt became the first lay headmistress of this convent. She made the costumes of this major production called Dido and Aeneas. Anyone familiar with it? It's an opera by Henry Purcell. 1948. And Miss Connie White here was the director, very brave woman. And she managed to get all these Malacca teachers into a choir with the help of Mr. Baruch, the conductor, with the musicians. And they had a grand show which was featured in the newspapers. My father is also there, and my two other aunts. And again, Miss Lim Keng Watt, my coachee, she played an important role. But the 2 main players are these 2 here. Mr. Theodore Moisenac and Florence Lazaru. Oh, I thought that was Connie White, but no. Okay. Anyway, they played the title roles of Dido and Aeneas. So if you take a look here, Malacca Teachers Musical Triumph. Then Connie White is here, and they tell you that if you're interested, because remember they are all amateurs, you know, and to have such a big cast with music, and it is opera. My aunt, my coachee, the youngest one, was complaining to my cousin that she said, I don't have a voice, but you know, they chose me and I had to act and you know, sing and all that, and they must have rehearsed very hard. Because it was a very commendable performance, grand voice, and then there is a lot of praise here. And so, when people say, what to do in Malacca, you know, backwater, very sleepy hollow, They were very active, and with a few dynamic leaders, there were shows to be had. But this was not the grand show that I'm going to end my presentation with. Oh, it's already too long, I'm sorry. Okay, shall I just go very fast? I'm sorry, I didn't take a look at the time. Okay, go on. Holy year, next on. Yeah, on. So sorry, more autographs and more. This one is the emergency. I'm so sorry. I think I was getting worked up. Yeah, I want to show this one because I want to end off with 1953. Next. Queen Elizabeth ascended the throne. Hillary ascended Mount Everest, and 900 players in a Malacca pageant. So, if you think Malacca cannot produce something like this, think again. 500 players, 400 in the choir, and 100 in the orchestra. My father was one of the orchestra players. And this is Michael Blaze, the brother director of SFI, who masterminded the whole show, attended by various VIPs, including Sir Gerald Templer. Next one. Pictures of Eileen Chua, one of the teachers of the French convent who succeeded my aunt as headmistress, Joyce Holloway, I think. But this is not a period, the costume is not in period, you know. So next one, the King and Queen of Portugal, played by Mr. and Mrs. Minjut, Lawrence or Matthias, and Helen. Yeah. So next please. There, here it is. And the costumes are really grand because they came all the way from Portugal. 9 big crates of period costumes, including weapons. Oh, I actually had a lot of, okay, next one, because I know you're getting, sorry. So this is the finale where you have the grand procession. The last tableau was St. Francis in Heaven. And so, that is our travel back through time. We started off with 1923. 1923, when you met a young Rangoon teacher homesick from Malacca, and traveled 30 years to 1953, where you met, as it were, the King and Queen of Portugal. So I hope you enjoyed this journey. I will let my father end off. Next slide. He says, with best wishes and love, Kenneth. Take what? You know, Kenneth. So, good night, everyone.
Okay, when you came in, I don't know what you expected, but you didn't know all that, did you? Right? So, as they say, when we are having a good time, time flies. So, in a short while, we've gone through how many years? 30 years?
30 years.
30 years, yeah. So, big thanks to her. We're going to have a short question and answer time, in case you have some questions to ask.
You want to ask about the pageant? Because I prepared so much information, yes?
You know, I noticed in the photo of the 15th parade, you have the Malayan flag.
Yeah. No, it's not.
It looks like...
Yes, it does look like a land flag, but I think if you look closely, it's probably not 13 stripes, you know. But that meant that there was somebody who had already sort of planned that kind of flag with the crescent.
So there was some controversy over the Malaysian flag this year.
Oh, is
So
it?
that means that flag existed before independence.
Yes, yes, it did, yeah. You know? Because when the British were defeated so badly, you know, the spirit of nationalism grew stronger, and the Malays wanted, you know, a Malaya for themselves, the country, and you know, but it was quite a bit of struggle up then. Anyway, any more questions? Yeah, Charles? Yeah.
Your father collected?
My father, no, not antiques. There are plenty of stamps, there are plenty of postcards. I'm talking thousands of postcards, thousands of stamps, matchboxes, so many things, you know, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Jimmy, sorry?
Audrey, I noticed that your father collected a lot of autographs during the, the victory parade. And some of them has the 136 that you explained. It was probably participants from Force 136.
Yeah.
Was that a comprehensive collection of all the participants?
I actually have 3 autograph books of my father's, and he has autographs from Han Su-yin, Tagore, Jade Snow Wong, who was a very famous author.
Okay,
also.
if we just restrict ourselves to the victory parade,
okay.
Therefore, would it be safe or correct to assume that among all those autographs there could be one of Chin Peng, who actually took part in the victory parade as well?
I'm wondering whether Chin Peng actually went on the victory parade or not. I was trying to find out. My father did say, because there's this big photograph, but unfortunately my father put it under glass, you know, and once it was taken out, the whole thing sort of disintegrated. But he said that Chin Peng was in the picture, but he was airbrushed out of it, you know, in disgrace, because he was the leader of the MCP.
I read somewhere he did get a OBE.
Yes, he did get it.
Empire.
Yes, and then it was withdrawn. It was rescinded. Any more questions? Yeah.
One more question.
Yes. One? Yeah.
Your father had kept a lot of very, all these mementos, which are of historical interest. So, what are you going to do with this? Because nowadays, they are so precious. Are you going to live with, start a museum or something like that?
Yeah.
Or hand it to some
I have a lot of mementos, and of course the first preference would be to my nieces and nephews. So I put them on Facebook and I say, you choose what you want. So some of them, okay, I want this, I want that, and all that. Some of them are not worth very much, but it's of sentimental value, like that commemorative issue of Edward VIII. And the postcards and the coins and things like that. The other things, I probably would donate them to some museums. No, I don't need here to but not, you know, really to...
Not to the museum, always to return to the Malaysian archives.
Malaysian archives, I do not know whether it tends to be a little bit... Yeah. Okay. No more questions? I think maybe it's... Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
No, okay. Right, just to add to the Kubu Stadium thing, the picture of the bus of Pamadasa, it is very worrying because I just noticed a few days ago that all the bandstand, they are outside of the fence. They have already put one section down, so they might pull the rest down, and then the rest will follow. Okay, a lot of people don't know that the Kubu Stadium was earlier called Pamadasa Stadium, and it was the first stadium in Malaya then. So I hope, we will all stand up and try to preserve that one.
Maybe the MIC to ask the government to change the name.
Well, he was a Sri Lankan, and when the bus was unveiled, it was in the Sri Lankan news. Okay, so with that, we'll end today's session.
Can I say something? I forgot because I was so worried that we all been sitting for 1.5 hours. I didn't realize, so just getting to my element. I would like to thank the Malaysian Heritage and History Club for inviting me to share the life and times of the collection. And my thanks to my gang of 4 here, well, with him 5. So Daniel, thank you for being so efficient with the slides. And I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I hope some of you will go into your old family albums and share some of your memories with us for future talks. Okay, I think Joe wants to plug something.
We have to start the Malacca archives because Malaysian archives are still there. They can never find your things out there. Okay, we would like to give something to Audrey. Okay. This is a gift from Jordan of Joe Design.
Is Joe here? No, okay. So nice. Thank you. Another Joe here.
3 cheers for Audrey.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, now she's very excited to us to mention this. The photographs that you've seen on her presentation, a lot of them are in this calendar that she has put together, and I think it is a very good collector's item. I've gone through it myself, and I think, one anak Malacca, her family proud. So it is on sale. They are limited copies, right? 10 ringgit each. Okay, you can get it outside. And I would like to thank the following persons. Miss Park for the tea. Adriana Tan for the Nyonya Quiz. And besides the sale of the calendar, being a very dedicated lady to her French convent, Audrey has also put out some convent books. The proceeds will go to the school.
Also heritage.
Yeah, also on the
Especially this one.
Yeah, the one on the left, our convent. Yeah. So more than that, we have someone who traveled a few states across, and her name is Francis Yip. She has written something about her family, titled The Caesar Sharpener's Daughter, and that's also available for sale behind. I forgot to mention earlier, all the drama that was going on made me forget. We have our own little drama queen, Audrey. She participated a lot, she acted in it, she wrote dramas for her school. She's in the Malacca theatre group. Yes. Ghostbusters? Sorry. Okay, so thank you all for coming and for staying on. The refreshments are available outside. Enjoy yourself.